Today we'll be finishing my workbook called The Promised Line from Isaac through Jacob, which covers Genesis chapters 25, verse 19 through Genesis 31, verse 55. If we look at the table of contents, we have done the first 8 chapters. We've had where Esau and Jacob were born, and then we see the difference in the two personalities. We see the peace treaty between Isaac and Abimelech. We see then Isaac, who is old, tries to give the blessing to Esau, but he ends up giving it to Jacob. So Jacob then has the birthright as well as the first son's blessing. And Esau gets very, very upset and threatens to kill his brother. Then in chapter 4, they send Jacob, Isaac, and Rebekah send Jacob to their family to the north to get wives, and Esau gets 3 Canaanite wives. Then on the way, in chapter 5, Jacob has lies down to dream and dreams about the staircase, the angel's staircase, ascending and descending. And that happens in chapter 5. And chapter 6, Jacob then arrives in Haran, um, um, lives with Laban's family, and he marries Leah and Rachel. He intends to marry Rachel, but he's tricked into marrying Leah as well. Then in chapter 7, we have his first 12 children that are born, 11 boys and 1 girl. And these are all through Leah and Rachel, and then their 2 attendants, Zilhah and Bilhah. And so you have 12 children born in 7 years. And so I explain how that can be done. Then in chapter 8, Jacob now has a full family. He's ready to go, but he has nothing for his household. And so in chapter 8, he works to get a flock to take with him. And it's his special flocks because God told him how to design his flocks. And so it has to do with genetics. So it's kind of interesting how genetics play a part, and herbs, things like that. Now we come to chapter 9, which is what we'll be doing today. Jacob flees from Laban, Genesis 31, 1 through 55. Genesis 31, 1. Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all this wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been. Then the Lord said to Jacob, Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. How old is everyone at this point? We have a reference from Jacob that he has worked for Laban for 20 years, so that could make Jacob around 97 years of age and Laban 139 or so. If Rachel was 12 when she was a shepherd, then she's 32 now. Leah as young as 33. The boys should be Reuben 13, Simeon 12, Levi 11, Judah 10, Daniel 9, Naphtali 8, Gad 8, Asher 7, Ishkar 7, Zebulun 6, Dinah 6, and Joseph 6. What were Laban's sons saying about Jacob? That he's taken their father for granted. What did Jacob notice about Laban? That Laban's attitude towards Jacob has changed. What did Jacob hear from the Lord? It's time to go home, time to go back to Canaan. What started as a contract quite favorable to Laban regarding the flock is now, through God's influence, becoming really favorable to Jacob. Laban's sons, seeing their inheritance dwindling away, are starting to become angry. God is wanting Jacob to move back to his homeland, as he's doing several things to make it so. First, he gave Jacob the desire to go back home in Genesis 30:25. Then he starts causing envy and jealousy in the sons of Laban, which is also affecting Laban's attitude toward Jacob. Now again, God gives Jacob the urgency to leave. The scriptures continue. Genesis 31:4. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and to Leah to come out to the fields where her flocks were. He said to them, I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before. but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said, the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said, the streaked ones will be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. Now we see that Laban had tried to manipulate the contract 10 times by saying just the speckled or just the streaked. And in all those times, God provided whatever was in Jacob's favor. Instead of making the decision to leave solely on his own, which is his right, who did he seek for counsel? Rachel and Leah, which was really nice of him. Were Rachel and Leah aware of all the changes Laban had made in the contract and how hard Jacob had worked? Yes. He had told him all the way through. Who does Jacob attribute his successes to? God. Genesis 31:10. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw the male goats mating with the flock, were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob, I answered, here I am. And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted. For I've seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar, where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. When did he have his dream? He had the dream when he saw the goats in breeding season. He had the dream in breeding season. And complete the sentence. I am the God of Bethel. This is where Jacob had the dream of stairway to heaven. What does God want Jacob to do? Leave at once and go back to his native land. Genesis 31:14. Then Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you. Number 1, complete the sentence. Do we have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? The answer is no, and that there should be, both because Jacob worked 14 years as dowry for his wives, and Jacob had increased Laban's flock. 2, does he not regard us as foreigners? Basically, Laban doesn't treat them like family, and yet, as we should soon see, he doesn't want anyone else to have them either. Number 3, not only has he sold us, but he used up what was paid for us. They hold it against their father that they were sold to Jacob without their personal consent. They do love Jacob now, mostly because he's treated them better than their old father. They also know the customs of a dowry would mean Laban should have money or possessions set aside for them. Number 4, surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. Jacob's increase in his flock they now see as their inheritance. Do they agree or disagree with Jacob to leave their father in Padan Aram? They agree with it. Here Jacob is being very unlike the rest of the men during that time. He sought counsel from his wives. Now, yes, they would have made it difficult if he just took them and their children, not seeking their counsel before making a decision. Truly shows the type of man he has become. Scriptures 31:17. Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all of his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he had accumulated in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Just a reminder again how old everyone is at this point. Rachel is as young as 32 now, Leah as young as 33. The boys should be Reuben, 13, Simeon, 12, Levi, 11, Judah, 10, Dan, 9, Naphtali, 8, Gad, 8, Asher, 7, Ishkar, 7, Zebulun, 6, Dinah, 6, and Joseph, 6. What did Jacob put his children and wives on? Camels. We have at least three items that prove Jacob has been very blessed. What are they, other than a large family, which is also a blessing? Livestock, goods, and camels. Does it appear that they told Laban that they were leaving? No. We will find out that Laban is busy shearing sheep, which is a perfect time for Jacob and his family to get quite a distance away. Where's Jacob heading with his family? To the land of Canaan. Look back at Genesis 24:45. What was Rebekah going to do when it was safe for Jacob to come home? If you look back there on that scripture, you'll find that she was supposed to give him word when it was safe to come back home. She has never done that. And so that's what's of concern. Do we have any evidence that the answer to 5 above happened? No, we have no evidence of that. Genesis 31:19. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban, the Arabian, by not telling him he was running away. Aramean. So he fled with all he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. What did Rachel steal when she packed and Laban was occupied with shearing the sheep? Rachel stole her father's household gods. So you realize that Rachel is also an idolater. This is now actual proof that Laban is an idol worshiper. Apparently, Rachel still believed in at least some of that too. Here, the author of Genesis, who is Moses, considers something that Jacob did was wrong. What was it? He did not tell Laban he was leaving. Make a line from Haran through the towns of Hamath and Damascus and heading towards Gilead. Let's do that. Well, we've got that already. Okay, so it's already been done for us. Okay. This would have been about 300 miles. If a camel can go 25 miles a day, the fastest time they would take to get there would be 12 days, and it would have been slower than that because they're dealing with their whole flocks and stuff. With all the people and possessions, do you think they were able to travel fast or slow? They would have been traveling very slow. Do you think Laban will chase them or let them go? I think based on his personality, he's going to chase them, even though he doesn't consider them, doesn't treat them right. He doesn't want to let anybody else have them either. Scriptures continue. Genesis 31:22. On the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. Taking his relatives with him, he pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. Then God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night and said to him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." How long after Jacob and his family left that Laban was told that they were gone? 3 days. Did Laban pursue Jacob? Yes. Who did he take with him? His relatives, so most likely his sons. So we have figured that Jacob and his family could not have made it to Gilead in less than 12 days, and we only have 10 days shown here. So there must have been at least 2 days left of sheep shearing or gathering of his relatives to pursue Jacob. Where did Laban and his relatives catch up with Jacob and his family? In the hill country of Gilead. Once he arrived, he must have decided to confront Jacob in the morning, so everybody made camp. What do you think Laban planned to do when he and his relatives caught up with Jacob and his family? I think he was going to cause a ruckus and confusion so much that they had to turn around and go back. Who came to Laban in a dream? God. Laban, as a grandson of Nahor and great-grandson of Terah, certainly knew about the God of Jacob, as all of this family are descendants of the promised line that came down through Terah, then to Abraham, to Isaac, and now to Jacob. He probably thought this God was one of many gods. What did God warn Laban not to do? Not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. We can understand not to say anything bad. Why do you think Laban was not to say anything good? Because Jacob would see falsehoods in it, And he also left without saying goodbye. So, you know, so basically, God didn't want him to say anything to him, is really how it was to be. The scriptures continue. Genesis 31:25. Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him. And Laban and his relatives camped there too. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You've deceived me, and you've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of timbrels and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing." What area were both camps, Laban's and Jacob's, in the hill country of Gilead? Laban accuses Jacob of several things. Let's list them. You've um, deceived me. Is this true? Not really. I mean, yes, he left without saying goodbye, but my goodness, it's more than time. He did tell him once he wanted to go home. You've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Is this true? No, they're his wives. He can do whatever he wants with his wives. What did Laban say he would have done if Jacob wanted to leave? Um, I would send you away with joy and singing to music of timbrels and harps. Considering how Laban pursued Jacob with all his relatives, do you see this statement as true? No, I don't see it as true. He didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. Is this true? Well, he didn't let him kiss him goodbye, but he didn't have much feeling for him either. Genesis 31:29. I have the power to harm you. But last night the God of your father said to me, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you've gone off because you've longed to return to your father's household. But why did you steal my gods? Jacob answered Laban, I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself whether there's anything of yours here with me, and if so, take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. It's interesting because he just makes a death sentence on Rachel that he doesn't even know. And Rachel is the first one of them to die. She doesn't die here, but she's the first one of them to die, which is, I wonder if it's connected to this, where he cursed his own favorite wife. What did Laban tell Jacob as the reason why he and his relatives are not going to harm Jacob? That he heard a message from God. Wanting to harm Jacob seems inconsistent with Laban's prior statements that he would have given a feast and he wanted to kiss his daughters and grandchildren goodbye. Yes, totally inconsistent. What does Laban assume, correctly, is the reason why Jacob had left? You've longed to return to your father's household. What did Laban accuse Jacob of? That he had taken one of his gods with him, one of his idols. Does Jacob know that it was his beloved Rachel that stole Laban's gods? No, he does not know that. Genesis 31:33. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and to the tent of the two female servants, but he found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them inside her camel's saddle and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent, but found nothing. Rachel said to her father, don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence, for the way of a woman is upon me. So he searched but could not find the household gods. Whose tent did Laban search through first? Jacob's. Obviously, Laban is searching for more than just his idols, as why would he search Jacob's tent first when he knows Jacob does not believe in gods and idols, rather? Which tent does Laban search last? Rachel's. Where had Rachel put the household goods? In her, inside her camel's saddle. What excuse did Rachel use for not standing in Laban's presence? That it was the way of a woman, that is, she had her period. Did Laban find the household gods? No, he did not. Genesis 31:36. Jacob was angry and took Laban to task. What is my crime? He asked Laban. How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household? Put it here in front of your relatives and mine. Let them judge between the two of us. Jacob now accuses Laban of many things. They are, what is my crime? How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? What have you found that belongs to your household? This is where we get the impression that Laban was looking for more than just his household gods. What does Jacob dare Laban to do? Put this stuff in front of your relatives and mine and let us judge. Who's going to judge between Laban and Jacob? All their relatives, both sides. Even though they were idols, household gods, who was protecting Jacob and his family from Laban finding the idols? God. How do you think this problem will be resolved? If you can't find anything and there's really no reason to stop Jacob, then unless he decides just out of anger and spite to cause problems, he may not do anything. Genesis 31:38. I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten rams from your flocks. I did not bring your animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. And you demand payment from me for whatever was stolen by day or night. Now we have a clearer idea of what happened while Jacob worked for Laban. How long had Jacob worked for Laban? 20 years. That'd be 14 years for his 2 wives and 6 years for the flocks of goats and sheep. Has Laban's sheep or goats ever miscarried under the care of Jacob? No. Did Jacob and his family ever eat or sacrifice a ram from Laban's flocks? No. If an animal was killed by a beast, did Jacob bear the loss himself rather than passing the loss on to Laban? Yes. The custom of the time was if you could bring the carcass back to the owner, then the hired shepherd was not held responsible for it. If any of the flock was stolen during the night, did Jacob have to pay for it? Yes. What, if any, would have been a standard business practice by any flock owner, and what was Jacob doing that was beyond the call of his service? He was bearing the loss of any animals torn by wild beasts, and he was going above and beyond what he needed to do. The scriptures continue. Genesis 31:40. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime and the cold at night, and sleep fed from my lies. It was like this for 20 years I was in your household. I worked for you for 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. If God of my father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you surely would have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you. Now we find out that being a shepherd was certainly not easy. What was the weather like when Jacob was out tending the sheep? Either the hot or cold. We believe Jacob started his sheep herding for Laban when he was 77 and ended at the age of 97. Did Jacob sleep well during his shepherding? No. How many times did Laban change his wages? 10 times. Since he did not get money but non-solid colored sheep and goats, we know how his wages were changed 10 times by Genesis 31:8. If he said the speckled ones would be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said the streaked ones will be your wages, then all the flocks have streaked young. Who does Jacob say was with him and helped him through it all? The God of his father and grandfather. The scriptures continue. Genesis 31:43. Laban answered Jacob, the women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine, about the children they have borne? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us. Laban says, the women are my daughters. While this is true, which one has the greater right over the women? Jacob, their husband, who purchased them with the dowry, or Laban, their father? Jacob, their husband. Laban says, the children are my children. While it may be true that the children are his grandchildren, who has the stronger right to them, their father or their grandfather? Their father, Jacob. Laban says, the flocks are my flocks. Yet, wasn't there a contract made between him and Jacob, fair and square, regarding the flocks? Yes. Although the parents of the flocks are owned by Laban, the present flocks are owned by Jacob. What does Laban want to make between him and Jacob? Covenant. What is the thing in number 4 going to serve as? It's going to be probably a witness between them, witness of what we will learn about soon. So Genesis 31:45. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. He said to his relatives, "Gather some stones." So they took stones and piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Chigar Sahadutha, and Jacob called it Galeed. And Laban said, "This is a witness between you and me today." That's why it was called Galeed. It was also called Mitzvah because he said, "May the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. If you mistreat my daughters, if you take any wives besides my daughters, even though no one was with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me." Who will help to make the pile of stones? All the relatives. What did Laban call it? Laban called it Jagar Sahadutha, which literally means the heap of testimony in Aramaic. Aramaic. Okay. What did Jacob call it? He called it Galeed, which literally means a heap of witness in Hebrew. What is it also called? Mitzpah, which literally means watchtower in Hebrew. The scriptures continue. Genesis 35:51. Laban also said to Jacob, "Here is this heap, and here is this pillar I have set up between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, that I will not go past this heap to your side to harm you, and you will not go past this heap and pillar to my side to harm me. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us." So from the previous page, number 1, if you mistreat my daughters, if you take any other wives besides my daughters, even though no one was with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me. This is the first of 2 statements that the heap of stones serve as a witness. 2, complete. I will not go past this heap to your side to harm you, and that you will not go past this heap and pillar to my side to harm me. This is the second of the 2 statements that the heap of stones serve as a witness to. Do you remember who the father of Abraham and Nahor was? Terah. Abraham and Nahor's father was Terah. So the scriptures continue. Genesis 31:53. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. He offered a sacrifice there in the hill country and invited his relatives to a meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them, and then he left and returned home. Jacob changed the oath from what Laban said to what? He took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. He knew his father and Abraham's God. He did not know the God of Nahor or Terah. That makes sense. Nahor and Terah were probably idol worshippers. Who offered the sacrifice? Jacob offered the sacrifice. Who did Jacob invite to the meal? All his relatives. Would this include Laban and his relatives too? Yes, indeed. When did Laban leave for his country? The next morning. Did he get a chance to kiss and bless his daughters and grandchildren? Yes. This is the last we hear about Laban. I would say, thank goodness. This is also the end of the chapter and the end of the book. I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you.